Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So having understood that what an innovative firm can indeed do and in fact change the very cost structure with which a neoclassical firm engages with, now we move on to understand how what kind of innovative firms are existing. This is a very interesting historical account once again from the work of Lazonick, who has pointed out that commemorating with a different industrial revolution, what we have seen a different setup of the firms. The set of the firms which has been talked about are essentially the outcome of the various social conditions that exist. However, the firms still differ from the firm which we encounter in the next industrial revolution. So the author began by talking about the British industrial district and the firms engaged there, moving on to the managerial firms in America, Japanese firm and the new economy firms. 1769, when Richard Arkwright and James Watt they patented their technologies. If you look at the certain changes in the industry at that point of a time, it was a phase of the rise of machines. The machines were coming in a format of spinning jenny, water frame, spinning mule, automatic mule, etc. The phase was also characterized by high mechanizations of the factory. The ruling technologies, or you can say the general purpose technologies, which have changed the way the things was done across the different industries, was iron, railroad and steam. The key industry that picked up during those time period belonged to textile and shipbuilding. In fact, the last half of the 19th century, Britain was mentioned to be a workshop of the world. On the other side, one has to also understand the political context of this industrial revolution, whereby you see that being a colonizer, it gives access to raw material and product market for the firms from Britain. The productive power of the firm during this time period was in the industrial district. These industrial districts are referred by Belushi and Caldery as an area where a concentration of firms have settled down. They have also made a distinction between industrial district and localized industries. The idea here is that the localization of the industry in a specific area happens either because of the physical condition, say for instance the availability of water. It can also happen due to the patronage of the court, which will lead to a high demand for the product. Moreover, a presence of a bigger town will also support the localization. These conditions were very much prevalent in the initial industrial districts of Britain, Bedfordshire and Buckinghamshire. However, over a period of a time, what we realize that there is a shift of this primitive localization, and the shift essentially leads to this kind of a localization transforming into industrial districts. So what are these advantages of being an industrial district? Essentially, there are hereditary skills. You may find that the mysteries of the trade, as has been alluded by Marshall in his work, they are no longer the mysteries of trade. In fact, what you will find that one generation of the craftsmen will learn from the earlier one. And that will lead to the building of the labor which is skilled in that particular art. Apart from that, there is a growth in the subsidiary trade, which might be either related to the supply of the raw material or of the final goods taking to the final market. The subsidiary trade will rather grow in this particular district, which will fuel or feed back into the development of the basic industry there. Thereby, we will find that the specific machinery that may be relevant for the firms in that particular industrial district can either be made available there, or there would be labor or there will be skilled labor who would be able to either work with it or improve it. Moreover, the local market will develop for the special skill which will be now able to work with that specialized machinery. Belushi and Caldery has also added two more characteristics talking about the industrial leadership that will develop and engage with the other firms in the particular industrial district, and the introduction of the novelties. Introduction of the novelties is once again related to the innovation that will occur within that particular industrial district. Here you will find once again the ideas of the Adam Smith, whereby he has pointed out that because certain people are engaged with either certain products or technologies, the motivation and the ideas to either improve them, improvise on them, or to introduce novelty on them will definitely be coming from them. As a result, what you will find that there are networks which will develop, and the communication between the communication among the novel products will also spread fast. The British industrial districts, as has been talked about, has some very specific characteristics. First of all, the major innovations that were being introduced during this time period was either coming from the producers or the users. The districts were led by the craft worker, though there was no role of a formal R&D which is being now conducted. Apart from that, the learning was also happening on the job. In fact, on-the-job apprenticeship is a mechanism through which the next generation of the craftsmen get ready. There is no use of corporate, university or government research labs in developing the new technologies in these British industrial districts. Moving on, during the second industrial revolution, once again, using phrase classification, 1879, when Thomas Edison invented light bulb and Carl Benz invented gas engine. These major general purpose technologies brought in a revolution in the way the things were being done in the different industries. One major change came in the form of the mass production with accurate machine tools to allow uniform parts to be mass produced. The introduction of the improvements in the machine tools is in fact a major contribution coming from this revolution. For instance, in 1928, Henry Ford has established a complex along the river road in Michigan. Apart from that, the major industries which are picking up during this time period included steel, oil refining, meat packing, tobacco, agricultural equipment, telecommunication, and electric power. That was also the phase with the introduction of the electric power war, when various machines or liberations were being introduced. Machines of liberation has been so termed because it made the day-to-day working rather easy. Or what you have are the appliances like dishwasher being introduced in 1929, refrigerator in 1960, toaster in 1909, washing machine in 1907, vacuum cleaner in 1907, and dryers in 1939. This particular phase has also identified that though entrepreneur or the owner entrepreneur are the major source through which the innovation happens in an innovative firm, there are limits to the growth. As you see that these firms now engage with the mass production, the level of the production of the goods increases. Clearly, the improvement in the scale now needs to be rather attended to by the managerial skill. There was limit to the growth of the origin owner entrepreneur skill. Then what is the solution? That is when you also see the separation of ownership and control. Very interestingly, the rise in the joint stock companies at that point of a time highlight how reaching the scale was much more easier in that kind of a companies. Moreover, this was also the phase when, as per Chandler, what you find is a managerial revolution that essentially started with the last decade of the 19th century. In 1908, Harvard University launched first graduate school in business administration, essentially to ensure the availability of the managerial skill in order to manage the firms which are now mass producing the products. This also led to the diversification in terms of the capabilities which are required to manage the companies vis-a-vis to creating the companies. Moreover, the capabilities which were developed for the managers was irrespective of the type of the product that you may talk about. It was easy for these managers to move from one kind of a firm to another, and also sometimes very easily to jump from one industry to another. So very specific characteristics that have been pointed out of this US managerial firm included that they were integrated managerial organizations. There was segmentation between the salaried manager and the hourly worker. That's the first time you find that this kind of a distinction is being made between the blue collar and the white collar worker. This white collar worker were highly mobile. As I said earlier, the capabilities they developed in the business school were irrespective of the type of the industry that you work with. So they were highly mobile in terms of organization, occupation, as well as in terms of the location. Moreover, as you see, the dichotomy emerges between the salaried manager and hourly worker. It has been pointed out. Now, it was much more important rather for the managers to invest in the labor saving technologies. That has led to the American system of manufacture with standardized precision engineered parts that could be used in the product without the intervention of the skilled worker. Moving forward, what you encounter is the Japanese challenge, which came in during the time period 1950s and 60s. Japanese companies developed innovative manufacturing capabilities initially, which was based on the borrowed technology. They had to reverse engineer them, initially imitate them, and then learn from that. So the imitation itself is an important part of the learning curve to produce the goods effectively to begin with for the domestic market. Some of the products in which the Japanese firms were having an edge over the American firms included karaoke system, compact disc, automatic looms, quartz watches. In terms of the specific characteristics, what we find that the focus of these Japanese firms was being on the cost reduction, maybe robotization, little waste, and introducing speed. They also very starkly differed from the way the work was being done in the American setup. Here, what you find, there is an integration of shop floor worker into the organizing learning process, whereby there was a clear distinction between the salaried worker from the shop worker in the American context. And having hands-on manufacturing experience in this case was in fact, particularly in Japanese case, was being treated as an important contribution for the upward mobility. Not only that, the literature also suggests that the financial system and the institutions that were there in Japan has indeed supported the establishment of the Japanese firm. To begin with, there was a cross-shareholding, whereby commercial banks and the companies, they took equities of the market by holding each other's share. A supportive bank system whereby high debt to equity ratio was being noticed also implied that the lending was there to support the Japanese firm. Now, moving onward, what we find is a new economy model. The new economy model is essentially built on what we call as an information and communication technology industry. The information and communication technology industry is such that indeed it has changed, whether we are talking about manufacturing sector, whether we are talking about the sex and the service sector. Essentially because it fulfills or enables the function of the information processing and communication by electronic means, including transmission and display. An important study by NRC on funding a revolution has pointed out that as we move into this new economy model, Detroit is no longer the symbolic center of the US industrial empire. What in fact you have is the Silicon Valley, which has enormous entrepreneurial vigor. The report further notes the men in the boardrooms and the grey flannel suits are now being replaced by casually dressed young founders of the startups, computer and internet companies. The report has very significantly highlighted that the US investment in the post-World War II in research collaborations with university and industrial corporations in developing computers and communication technologies has indeed contributed immensely to the development of this new economy model. These numbers are again based on the same report, highlights that the federal funding, that means the government's funding for research in computer science, it climbed from less than 10 million in 1960 to almost 1 billion in 1995. Federal support has also constituted around 70% of the university funding of total research in computer science and electrical engineering. Financial support from the federal government in the form of research assistantship to graduate students was rather high. And these graduate students belong to MIT, Stanford, UC Berkeley, and Carnegie Mellon. Say, for example, the case of relational database, whereby the idea of developing a relational database technology, which is now a billion-dollar industry dominated by US companies such as Informix, Sybase, IBM, and Oracle. Initially, it relied on the complementary efforts of industry and government-sponsored academics. The NSF, that is the National Science Foundation, indeed funded the INGRIS project at the University of California at Berkeley, spreading expertise and rekindling market interest in relation database. Many companies which are now producing relation database have on their staff or were founded by participants in INGRIS. These are the quotations from National Research Council's document on funding a revolution, government support for computing research. So what you find is, even including internet, it built on the research conducted by Paul Barron and Donald Davis. Like DARPA, which is funded the development of the ARPANET by industry and academia. NSF, which funded development of network for research and educational uses, laid the groundwork for today's network. Timothy Berlin, Lee, CERN, and Mark Anderson, they devised the WWW and browser technology, which were a part of the NSF sponsored National Center for Supercomputing Applications at University of Illinois. Now, what do you have? What we have is indeed a new economy model, where you find that in the 1960s, the key players included IBM, Fairchild, Semiconductor, Texas Instruments. The technologies are essentially, as we told earlier, information and communication technologies, with immense commercial opportunities for electronic chips, induced the creation of semiconductor startups. That did happen during the second half of 1960s. In the 1970s, it was witnessed that the region around Stanford University was being dubbed as Silicon Valley. It was reminding of the way Marshall has put together the concept of industrial district, whereby he has pointed out the mysteries of the trade were in air, effectively highlighting the network, the informal communication that lead to more and more innovative products in the market. A very important consideration with respect to this new economy model are the personnel and the compensation. This was indeed a very important point of digression from the way the US managerial firm and the corporation has evolved. Literature also highlights that how the very basic of the Japanese firm, which included the engagement of the shop worker in the overall innovation, in fact created circumstances whereby they could not lead the ICT revolution. The new economy model essentially needs an attention towards the way the personnel developed in this particular sector and also the compensation strategy that was being devised. These were the two major points of departures from the way universal managerial corporations has emerged. If you look at the personnel engaged, they were not only engineers, but many a times a university faculty member. Say, for example, the founders of Cisco. So the key personnel engaged in the development of these startups and other enterprises, in terms of the major support that these personnel received, it came from venture capitalists. The venture capitalists, they took the risk, introduced different mechanisms through which they can finance these enterprises. The role of these venture capitalists was not only limited to providing them fund, but also at times having a strategic control. This strategic control, as we will look at the financing of startups, was essentially also to overcome the problem of information asymmetry and the agency problem associated with that. The strategic control also ensured that over a period of a time, the startup would engage with the professional managers and that will help them to scale up. Another important innovation in terms of the organization in the firms of the new economy model was the stock-based compensation, whereby instead of the cash salaries, we were looking at the employees being made part of the growth story itself. Once they are engaged in the growth story of the company, clearly the contribution made by them also increased immensely. This was also a very important tool through which the retained through which the employees can be retained. Note that we have earlier talked about how the US managerial revolution has indeed created a separate set of managers who are highly mobile with respect to the industries and firms. So, in this case, if the companies now indeed want to engage with the high skilled labor, ensure that they do not go out and start their own venture. Essentially, they have to make them the important part of the growth of that particular startup and the enterprises. And stock based compensation was indeed being seen as a major way to do that. There are critics who have pointed out that in fact some of these companies initially learning from the outcome of the research which was being supported by the government has over a period of a time has now been engaged with more of a financial gimmickry. They have been either acquiring other firms or essentially managing their finances rather than being rather more innovative. Keeping that critique aside, one thing is evident that this new economy model created also a kind of framework, you can say, through which now various developing countries, even like countries like India, are learning and trying to create an ecosystem whereby such kind of dynamism can be created in the industry.